Thank you for joining us here on this Friday morning. We're very happy to have you here. My name is Daniel Stauning. I'm a product engineer on the Business Analyst team, and we have Max Sattarov and Stephen Boyd, two of the lead developers on the Business Analyst team. And we're going to talk today about the GeoEnrichment service and how you might use it, and we'll give a high-level overview of kind of what it is, and then we'll get right into some demos and some code samples. And then at the end of the session, we'll have links to the GitHub repository where we have the code samples if you'd like to go download them and check them out. And we'll have some links to some of our documentation as well and some contact information if you'd like to reach out with any questions to us. So I guess a quick show of hands, do we have any users of the Business Analyst Web App or any Business Analyst products here? Great. Do we have any users with custom applications that use the GeoEnrichment API? Awesome. Okay. So just a quick high-level overview of the GeoEnrichment service. It's an ArcGIS Online utility service. It's available on the cloud and also with the 10.5 Enterprise. So it's a utility service that provides the ability to get facts about a location or any given area. So specifically, you can create a point on a map and generate a buffer or a drive time area and get more information about that location. You can retrieve demographic information and other relevant characteristics associated with the surrounding area. So the primary users of the GeoEnrichment service would be some of the existing Esri applications like the Business Analyst Web App. Business Analyst Desktop can use the GeoEnrichment service in online mode, and other applications like ArcGIS Maps for Office. But there's also, the REST API is well documented, and there are lots of users that do have custom applications as well. And we'll take a look at some of that documentation and kind of walk you through, where to find it and how to use some of those parameters. And then we'll have links to that documentation at the end of the session as well. We'll talk a bit about the data apportionment algorithms and how we, aggregate data for study areas like rings and drive times. It's kind of the bread and butter behind the service. We'll talk about the underlying data and how it's grouped into thematic categories that we refer to as data collections. And in Stephen's demo, we'll take a look at the data browser, which is kind of a nice UI that allows you to select a category and then drill down into that category and find specific variables that are interesting for your analysis. We have a team of demographers that do current year estimates and 5-year forecasts based on the 2010 census as a benchmark. And we do annual updates of the US data. So the 2017 US data update should be available around UC time this year. And so the way GeoEnrichment would typically express itself in an application would be through infographics, reports, and data enrichment. So infographics, the ability to click a location on a map and get pop-up information with key facts about that location. Reports, so the ability to generate either a PDF or Excel report with the variables nicely formatted in a human readable way. And then data enrichment, so the ability to append the demographic and socioeconomic data from the GeoEnrichment service to your own data. So we have coverage for 137 countries, but by far the most variables we have are for the US as well as Canada, and the international countries, we have about 100 variables per country for non-US countries, and these range from just key facts like population, average household size, gender and income. This data is provided by Michael Bauer Research, whereas the US data we derive largely from the census and then additional data from the American Community Survey and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the US data is kind of grouped in, I guess, 4 main categories. You would have the demographic data, the business data with business locations and business summary data. So, for example, how many employees work at a given business. And then also the tapestry segmentation, which is characterization of neighborhoods throughout the country based on those socioeconomic characteristics. The data is very accurate. We've had blind studies commissioned where 4 independent researchers have compared our data to data from 5 other major data vendors, and in those blind studies, Esri's data has been ranked the most accurate. And if you'd like to read more about these studies, you can check out the documentation links that we have at the end of the session. So some industries and markets that we'd use Business Analyst, a common use case would be site selection for real estate practitioners. You want to find the best location, the best spot for your new location. City planners, for example, want to attract the right businesses and know where to locate parks and hospitals and fire stations. And then with the GeoEnrichment service, in the 10.5 enterprise, the option to configure that locally on your own infrastructure behind your firewall is important for healthcare industry, for example, and HIPAA compliance. So it's very important for the healthcare industry. They can't store patient data in the cloud. There are privacy concerns there. So the ability to have all of your data locally and configure the GeoEnrichment service locally on your own infrastructure behind your firewall is an exciting new story that we have at 10.5. So we'll talk a bit about the data apportionment. So in this example, this would be an example of our most accurate data apportionment method, weighted block centroid retrieval. So you can see that in this, what we would call an irregular study area, this ring here, it intersects 4 census block groups. And populations aren't distributed evenly. So the key here is that we're intersecting individual block groups or individual census blocks within these block groups, summarizing those and then applying a weight to the block group. And in this way, we can get a much more accurate estimate than rather than a simple retrieval or geometric apportionment, where we would just summarize the area of that block group. When we can summarize the individual census blocks and then apply a weighted total to the block group, we get a much more accurate estimate here. And so with that, we'll get right into the demos here. We have Max Sattarov. He'll be showing some Python code samples. And after Max, we'll have Steven showing some JavaScript code samples.
Hey, everyone. My demo will be, my part of the tech session will be mostly focused in ArcGIS Pro and geoprocessing and Python. Most of the code will actually run just fine outside of ArcGIS Pro. It's only the piece that is related to the authentication that is specific to ArcGIS Pro here. Here I have a couple of locations in San Francisco area, and I want to find out what kind of people live in those areas. And I want the results to be a nicely formatted report rather than just the data dump. By the way, if you want just the data about this area, there is already a tool for that that is using GeoEnrichment service, and it's in analysis, and it's called Enrich Layer. The tool that we'll be working today on is create reports. I will just open that. I can select the input features here, and my country will stay the default, the US, and I'll choose the demographic and income report to run. And I just need to select the output. All right, the tool is running. Currently, it's talking to the GeoEnrichment service in ArcGIS Online. And here's my result. So you can see that I have a nicely formatted report here. It's got the population summary. It's got trends about trends of population, household counts. I have a breakdown by income, by age, and by ethnicity, and a few charts that represent that same information. So now let's take a look at the GeoEnrichment service and see how we can recreate that tool in ArcGIS Pro. First, I want to show you the documentation about GeoEnrichment. So you can go to geoenrich.arcgis.com and just browse the docs. So we have a summary information about the GeoEnrichment service here, basically the same information that Dan was talking about. There is a topic related to accessing the service. I will get that kind of for free because I'm already in ArcGIS Pro and I'm getting the token from the framework. The data apportionment methodology and GeoEnrichment coverage. Here, one interesting point about this, the coverage is that we have an endpoint in GeoEnrichment that basically tells you what kind of, which countries are available in the service. So that will be one of the endpoints that we'll be using in our sample. This endpoint returns you a JSON that has an array of the countries. I will be just taking the ID of the country, but there is also a bunch of other metadata about each country available. Now let's get to create reports, and in particular to the samples. So the first example here is just getting all available report templates for the country. This endpoint just returns you again an array, and it's got the report ID that is used to identify the report template and a number of other properties. And the second example is just running that report for a point. So this actually returns you exact same report that I have just created in ArcGIS Pro. So you can look at it, and it's the same information. All right, now let's jump back to ArcGIS Pro. And first I want to run a few sample requests, and I will do that in a Python window, which is kind of a playground for Python code inside ArcGIS Pro. The first thing I will do is import in the requests library. That is the library that I will be using to make requests to the servers. The next step, I need to know what portal or ArcGIS Online instance I'm connected to. And that's done through this ArcPy call called getActivePortalURL. And you can see that I'm currently connected to ArcGIS Online. I will remember that URL in a variable. And now I need to talk to the portal, but before I can do that, I need to have a token. I need to authenticate at the portal. ArcGIS Pro is already signed in, so I can just get the token from ArcGIS Pro. Let me remember that in a variable again. And now we are ready to make the first call to the server. To do that, I need first to prepare the parameters. And in this case, I have only two parameters, the format, which will be the JSON, and a token, which will be my token variable. Now I use the requests library to make my first request. And that will be to sharing/portal/self endpoint. That basically returns the information about the portal. If we take a look at the actual response, it's going to have a lot of information, including the... I'm sorry. Yep, there we go. Including security of the portal, information about the living atlas, information about the groups, but more importantly, we will have the helper services there. And one of the helper services is the GeoEnrichment. And to get that information, I will just parse the JSON, get the helper services node, get the GeoEnrichment node, and get the URL from it. So this is my GeoEnrichment URL. It's important to always use the helper services to get that, because different portals might be connected to different instances of GeoEnrichment service. All right, let me remember that base URL here. All right, now it's time to do the first request to the GeoEnrichment service, and that will be discovery of the countries. So I use the base URL /geoenrichment/countries and send in the same data, which is format and token. And response is going to be a little bit long. And it's got all the countries that are available in the GeoEnrichment service. Let's take a look at the output for just one of the countries. That's going to be number 20, and it happens to be Bulgaria. From that response, I will actually be using just the ID, but there is also a bunch of other information about the country there. So my ID will be BG. Now I can get the list of available reports for this country. And I do that by just going to geoenrichment/reports/bg, and I send in the same data that contains the token. And the response contains 2 report templates that are available for Bulgaria, and that's Bulgaria summary and the sitemap report. All right, the last thing I wanted to show you in the Python window is this little piece of code here. And that will show you that you can actually run the same requests in a browser. So there is some Python magic happening here, but what it's doing is just converting from the requests library format to the browser-friendly URL format. Let me just execute that. And now I can get the same request in a browser format. Oops. There we go. So now I can copy from here, paste it into the browser, and just run it. So I get the exact same response here. All right, now let's start working on our GP tool. First, what I will do is just creating a new empty Python toolbox. It will be called create report. So it's here, it's got a single tool that has no parameters and does nothing, so it runs very quick. Okay, so my first step would be to bring in the GeoEnrichment related code into this code. By the way, this Python toolbox is actually a text file that I can open in Notepad and just start editing it. I will tell Notepad that it is actually Python. And now I brought in a few imports. So I'm using only the libraries that actually come with ArcGIS Pro, so there is nothing that you need to install. I'm using ArcPy because I need to talk to ArcGIS Pro. I'm using requests for the server requests. I'm using temp file to store my temporary data, JSON to parse the JSON format, functools to work with the lists, shoutil to work with the files, and ctypes to work with windows. And the second thing that I want to do is, I need to bring in the GeoEnrichment class from here. So this class incorporates all the GeoEnrichment calls that I will be doing. So first call is just to get the GeoEnrichment URL here. The same thing basically that I did in the Python window. Second call gets all the countries. Here is the URL. And what it returns is just a list of IDs and names of the countries. Third call is get report templates. Again, the URL, and I'm returning the list of report IDs and names. And the last one is kind of more interesting. It's create report. So it got much more data in the input. I'm passing in the study areas. I will talk about that a little bit later when we get to the execute. Format, file format, which is going to be PDF, the report template, and I'm passing in the app ID because we want to know how much you guys will use this code sample, and the token. Then I make a request, And then I'm checking the response status, and if everything went well, then I will read the chunks from the response and write them into the PDF file. And there are several kind of internal methods here as well. All right, one more thing that I wanted to do here is rename the class. I want to call it create report tool, and I will rename the tool itself. It will be called create report tool. All right, and the last thing I need to do is make sure that the toolbox knows about this rename. All right, now I can save this file, go back to ArcGIS Pro, refresh the toolbox, and now you can see that my changes are immediately reflected here. If I just click it, it still has no parameters and no execute, so nothing new here, but we have all the preparation done. All right, my step 2 is to replace the init and get parameter info functions. So I will just replace the stubs that were created by ArcGIS Pro. And the only difference in init is that I'm getting the GeoEnrichment instance because I want to be able to make the request to GeoEnrichment. And in get parameters info, I'm basically telling the framework what are going to be my tool parameters. So my first parameter is input features, type is GP feature layer. Second parameter is the country, and the type is just string, but I'm setting up the filter for it. And here I will actually make my first request to the GeoEnrichment. So I'm getting the list of countries from the service and set it as a filter for my parameter. The third parameter is the input report template, and the last one is output PDF. For that, I'm setting a kind of a filter to PDF because I want to create a PDF output. I can now save it, go back to ArcGIS Pro, refresh the toolbox, and run it. Now again, it's still doing nothing, but it's got already 4 parameters. It did the first request to the GeoEnrichment and got the list of available countries. So now I can see the list in the parameter. All right, third step is update parameters. This is a function that is called when a user makes any changes to the parameters. I'm replacing the empty implementation here. So what I do here is if my parameter number 1 changes, which means that user have switched the country, I will get the new list of report templates for that specific country and set it as the filter for my second parameter, which is report template. Let's see how that works. Go back, refresh the toolbox, run it. So now by default I have US here. And this is the list of the report templates that are available for the United States. But if I switch to, say, Great Britain, the list of report templates will be different. So that code actually works. All right, and the last step is to do the execute. That's the method that is called when a user actually runs the tool. What I do here is just get the parameter values from the framework, convert the input features to JSON. There is a GP tool for that. It's called features to JSON. Then I read and parse the results of that GP tool, load into Python dictionary. Then I have to actually get the spatial reference of the feature class and make sure that every geometry in the list of features knows about the spatial reference, and this is how I do it. And then I just pass it to the create report endpoint. So let me save that, and we should be able to run the tool now. I can select sample locations. Those are these 2 points. My country will be still the United States. I will choose, let's say, one of the market potential reports. And again, it will be test PDF. I can run it. Now this is my resultant PDF file. You can see that it's got quite a bit of variables related to the health. We literally have thousands and thousands of variables in the service, and many of them are available through reports, but all of them are available through the Enrich endpoint. So you can find a lot of information that might be interesting for you. All right, one last thing that I wanted to show you is that in this code, I have actually logged the request that I sent to the server into the messages. So this call to add message logs the URL into the Python window here. So I can copy the request from here and run it separately through the browser. And I'm going to get the exact same result here. So it's the same report that I was getting in the ArcGIS Pro app. And I can actually get it in a different format. Say if I don't like the PDF, I can replace it with Excel. Right, my report is MPI Health here. My format is binary, and the file format I will change to Excel. And now I get all the same information, but this time in an Excel file. Hope Excel will open up eventually. Yeah, there we go. All right. So all the same information is now available in the spreadsheet. That's about it for my demo. So passing to you, Steven.
All right, let me switch over. My mic on? Test it. Nope. Test, test, test. Thanks, Max. All right, so I'm going to kind of pick up where Max left off on the create report piece. I'll show you how you can do that in the JavaScript API. So I've got 2 demos. The first one I'll run through is that report, creating the report, and then the second one I'm going to show you is how to actually use Enrich to enrich an area. So just piggybacking off Max, I'll go through the demo, the end result first, and then I'll dive into the code and show you how I did that. So right here, I've got a map of the Palm Springs area. I've got a list of all the reports that are available in the United States. So I can just select any one of these, click my button, and then I'm going to select just a location on the map. And so what's happening, I'll kind of walk through what's happening here, is when I clicked on the point location, I created just a default 1 mile buffer around that point that I clicked on, and then I'm going to actually run that report out on calling GeoEnrichment to create that report. So I'm using the JavaScript API, and I'll show you how I use the authentication because I need to log in here. Okay, so if you saw that happen really fast, what happened was I'm opening the create report call in a new window, which is then actually returning back a PDF. So if you see down in the bottom left of my screen, that report then got downloaded. I was able to run a business summary report for that one location that I had selected. So let's run another report. Let's do the dominant tapestry. Let's click over here on our map. And again, this is going to download that PDF report that I requested. So this is the dominant tapestry for that particular area that I selected. So just a quick plug for, I'm the lead developer on the Business Analyst Web application, and we've got a whole list of reports, not only in the US, but around the world. But in the Business Analyst Web App, you can actually build your own custom report. So if you wanted to kind of combine the best of 3 reports into one and add some other variables, you can do that through a build experience in the Business Analyst Web App, and then you can call the same create report endpoint, pass in the ID of that custom report that you created, and get that generated. And that's not available just inside the Business Analyst Web App. You can actually call that create report from outside the web app. So you could author it in the web app and then call it in your own custom from your own custom code outside. All right, so let's switch over and dive into the code to see how I actually did this. Whoop. Didn't want to pull that up. Okay, so I'm using the latest JavaScript API, 3.20. I think it came out late last week. A couple things I wanted to call out here where I'm using the Esri JavaScript API Identity Manager. So this is nice because it actually handles the whole authentication piece automatically for you with just a simple call. In this case, if you're actually doing a normal just an Esri request, which I'll show in my enriched sample, it actually handles it with no code whatsoever. So the first request I'm making after the application or the page loads is that same call out to reports/US. So this is getting a list of all those available reports that are in the United States. And then when I get that response back, all I'm doing is populating that drop down that I had in the upper left corner. Here I'm just initializing the JavaScript API map. And then when the reports run button is clicked, what I'm actually doing is listening for an event when the user clicks on the map. I'm creating my 1 mile buffer ring around it, adding that to the map. I'm doing a little bit of parsing here to actually convert that to a nice, the latitude and longitude, so I can actually pass that to the create rate report endpoint so I can get a nice header description for the area. Okay, so here's where I'm actually calling the identity manager from the JavaScript API to get my credentials. So I'm pointing against ArcGIS Online, and then this is what is prompting for the user's credentials. So after I get that credential, I need that token to pass into the report parameters. So here's where I'm actually building out the parameters that we're going to specify to the report. So there's really good documentation over here that Max already kind of went through. So this is for the create report endpoint. The study area, in our case, is that polygon, the 1 mile area that around my point that I created. But you could actually also pass in just a XY location, and by default it would include a 1 mile buffer around it. You can pass in a polygon study area, which we're doing. You can even pass in administrative boundaries. So think, I want to run this report for the whole state of California. I want to run it for the zip code 92373, which is where we're at in Redlands, or you can even enter an address, which will then geocode it and then add a buffer around it. Okay, so the format here was a PDF. Max showed that you can actually change this just to XLS, and that'll be an Excel spreadsheet. The study areas I already went over. The report field, so this is a list of optional parameters that you can pass in if you want to format a nice header. So here I'm passing the location name, lat long, the latitude, longitude, and a subtitle. So if you scroll down here, this explains all the different parameters that you can pass in, and then where they're actually located up in the header. All right, and then finally we're passing that token we got from the Esri Identity Manager. So after that, I'm calling the create report endpoint, building out the URL with all my parameters, and then just opening that in a new window. So that's the create report sample. All right, so switching over to my second demo, I want to show you how to call the GeoEnrichment enrich endpoint. So here I'm in the area of San Francisco. By default, I've got this 2016 total population variable selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a kind of rectangle around the area. So I'm going to let this kick off, and then I'll walk you through what I'm doing. So again, I'm letting the JavaScript API handle the authentication. Okay, so what happened here was I took that rectangle that I created, I carved it up into a 10 by 10 grid. So I've got 100 layers, or 100 features here, and then I sent each one of those features off to the GeoEnrichment enrich endpoint to get back the total population for each one of those areas. And I then took the data that was sent back from GeoEnrichment, and then I used our JavaScript API smart mapping to kind of create a nice, pretty color-coded map here. So I broke it down into a quintile, 5 categories of data. So I can click on any one of these areas and actually see the total population that is in them. And then I also created a legend with a JavaScript API just to give you an idea of what those colored areas represent. Okay, so we talked about how many variables we have in the United States. We've got a nice data browser which actually takes all those variables and puts it in a nice categorized view to help you drill down and find exactly the variable you're interested in. I think last I checked, we've got over 7,000 variables in the United States. So you've got your standard demographics data, you got your population, income, broken down by age, households. We've got consumer spending habits. So thinking like who bought athletic shoes in the last 12 months, we've got data on that. We've got data about who's likely to buy a hybrid vehicle in the next 12 months. We even have TV viewing habits. So let's see, who was actually watching HBO in the last week. So let's say we wanted to know who was trying to get caught up on Game of Thrones before the summer premiere coming out in San Francisco. Here's data for that. So we can see in this area, 5,821 people watched HBO in the last week. So what's really great about the GeoEnrichment enrich endpoint is I can get data at any level. So here, this is the whole city of San Francisco. But let's say I want to drill down even farther into this particular area. So I can do that and go down even all the way down to the block level to see what the TV viewing habits are. Let's say we wanted to go the other way, and let's go out to the state of California. I can do the same thing here. Let me draw my rectangle around the state of California. And then there's the TV viewing habits there. Let's go out a couple more levels to the whole United States. And we can see the HBO viewing habits of everybody in the United States. So I really like this demo because it's kind of a pretty powerful tool that shows you how you can use Enrich to get data on any location in the United States, all the way from the whole country level all the way down to the block groups in a particular area. All right, so let's switch over to the code and show you what I did in this sample. All right, so again, I'm using the latest JavaScript API 320. One thing I wanted to call out is if you're actually using the data browser, you're going to need to include the data browser CSS style sheet. I'm pulling in the CalSites style sheet, which includes the data browser. So you can either do this, or you'd have to add the GeoEnrichment data browser.css file directly. The standard Esri CSS file does not include that. So if you ever try to use this and then your data browser that you pull up isn't formatted correctly, that's what you're missing. All right, so let me scroll down to a little bit of code. I broke down my rectangle that I drew into a 10 by 10 grid, and the reason why I chose that was 100 features is the maximum number of features you can enrich at one time in a request to GeoEnrichment. So if I had made this any larger, say 20 by 20, and tried to send over 400 features, the GeoEnrichment enrich endpoint would have returned back an error saying you're trying to enrich too many features. So here's my default total population variable that was selected when I first started up. A couple things I want to point out. So here's the Esri digit GeoEnrichment data browser, if you want to pull that in. Here's the Esri smart mapping renderer that I used to make that nice color-coded map automatically for me. And then I'm also creating that legend from the JavaScript API as well. All right, so instantiating and launching the data browser is pretty straightforward. You just need to instantiate a new instance of the JavaScript API data browser. There's a couple parameters that you can pass in. There's really good documentation out on the JavaScript API site for the data browser. So in this instance, I'm passing in the country, the US, because we're working there. But again, we've got those variables available for any country around the world. You're actually able to specify what you want the OK button, the back button, the cancel buttons to be the text of those. A little bit of information on the selection limit. So you can specify this, if you want to limit the user to only selecting one variable, which I did here, they can do that. If I increase this to say 5, what would have happened was you would have actually got a nice shopping cart up here in the top right, and then the user would have had checkboxes next to each one of these, so they could have selected up to 5 variables. So if you want to do an enrich on multiple variables, you can actually enable that in the data browser, allowing them to select more than one variable at a time. But in our sample, we're only selecting one, and then after the database, after a variable is selected, the OK event is getting fired. What I'm doing here is 2 things. One, I'm just setting the text of the selected variable up here, and then I'm also setting that variable locally here to be used later when we actually call the enrich request. So I'm using the Esri digit pop-up to open that in a pop-up window. You could also just put it in a div anywhere on the page as well. And finally, don't forget this is that you need to call the data browser startup function in order for it to initialize and load. So here's my JavaScript API map. Nothing fancy here around the area of San Francisco. And then here's where most of the action happens on after the rectangle is drawn by the user. So what I've got here is just a bunch of for loops to build out that 10 by 10 grid that we talked about. And then what that's doing is generating 100 features, 100 polygon features, which I'm then going to pass into my enrich request. So I'm going to just build out the study area JSON that I need here. So that becomes my study areas. And just like we did with create report, there's actually multiple ways to call GeoEnrichment enrich. So same thing, if you want to pass in a XY location, you can do that. You can pass in a polygon, which is what we're doing in our sample. You can pass in a named statistical area, state of California, a particular zip code, and get variables for that location for each one of those. The analysis variable, so this is the ID of the variable that we want to have GeoEnrichment return information for. I'm passing return geometry set to true, so this will actually return back the same geometry that we're passing in. And then I'm specifying the output spatial reference that I want that geometry to be returned in. And then the format is going to be JSON. All right, so I'm using the Esri request utility to call GeoEnrichment/enrich the endpoint. And what's nice about doing this is this actually handles the authentication for me. So if you were looking at the Fiddler request going out, what you would see is you would see a GeoEnrichment request go out with all our parameters. You're going to get back a 403 error that says, hey, this is you don't have a token. And then the JavaScript API identity manager is going to intercept that, prompt you for authentication. Once it gets the authenticated token, it's going to then make that same request again, except this time it's passing the token. And then you'll get back the GeoEnriched data. So once I get back my response, what's actually returned is actually a feature set with all the values returned. And then so what I'm doing here is just going to create a feature layer with all that geometry that was returned. One note is I actually have to add the spatial reference to the returned geometry. It's not returned automatically for you. And then after that, I'm setting a pop-up template and then creating a feature layer with that feature set that was returned. So once I've got the feature layer, I'm adding it to the map, and then I'm using the smart mapping create class color renderer function to generate a kind of a really pretty color-coded map for me. So I'm doing a quantile classification method on that. Once that class renderer comes back, all you have to do is set the layer renderer to be that, give it a little bit of transparency, and then redraw it on the map. And then I'm also creating just your standard JavaScript API legend as well. So that's it. So I walked through the code on GeoEnrichment Enrich. So I just wanted to point out that this was ran on ArcGIS Online, but if you had our 10.5 release, a BA server, you could actually run this on your own premises, that same code, the same calls to enrich your own data can be done. So that concludes my demo. I'm going to turn it back over to Dan to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, so here are some resources for you. The first link here is the short URL to the GitHub repository where we have the code samples that Max and Steven just demoed for you. We have the GeoEnrichment service overview page here, and from there you can find the REST API documentation as well. We have the JavaScript code samples and also some documentation on the data. So you can go there, you can find the methodology, also variable lists, and there's the data browser that Steven showed is also on the demographics documentation page there as well. Here are some. Here's my email, and we have Tony Hauser in the crowd here. Tony is our product manager. So if you have any, if you want to follow up with us with any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. And we have some time for Q&A now as well. So we'll take any questions that you may have. Yes, over here. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Okay? So the question was, is that 100 feature limit a hard limit, or is that or per call? So yes, you're right. So if I had a 20 by 20 grid, in which case I had 400 features, I'd have to make 4 separate calls each with 100. So I would have just had to implement some kind of batch processing there, and I could have done that.
Yes. So there are a few options there. There is a parameter. Yes. So the question was if you want to do a multi-country query. So the scenario would be you have a study area that overlaps two countries. So what you can do is you can aggregate the response from each country into a single feature, or you can have 2 separate features returned, one for each. So say your study area is on the border of Canada and the U.S. You could return 2 features, one for Canada, one for the U.S., or you could return a single feature with the data aggregated into a single response. And there's an optional parameter for that called aggregate multiple countries. And there's some information on that parameter in the REST documentation. And also, I believe, is there a preference in the BA Web App to, no? Okay.
Yeah, the BA Web App just lets you focus on one country at a time.
Okay. Yes?
If someone did the custom report, is that tied to the user, or did they share that out to an organization and then hit it through the API?
Yeah, that can be shared with the organization. It can be shared with everyone.
So yeah, repeat the question just so we get it recorded.
I'm sorry. So the question is, if you're authoring a custom report in the BA Web App, is that report owned by just a single user, or can it be shared with the rest of the organization? And the answer is that it can be shared, and other users within that organization can call that report for their study areas as well. Yes.
I noticed that you were using the 3.2 JavaScript. What's the correlation to the 4.x JavaScript API?
Yeah. So I'm not an expert on the JavaScript API. I work on the web app. The question was, what's the difference between the 3.2 JavaScript API, 3.20 JavaScript API that I demoed with, and then the 4.x 4.x. I think they're on 4.3 right now. So it's kind of, my understanding is it's basically a breaking change between 3.2 and 4.3. So you would have to kind of rewrite your whole application to do it. But I don't have a demo on the 4.3, but I could have put one together because I'm just making Esri, just making endpoint requests there. The smart mapping might have been a little bit different, and then the instantiating the feature layer may have been a little bit different. But if you went and grabbed my sample, you should be able to do a pretty quick translation to be compatible with 4.x.
Yes. So the question is, are the code samples available online? So the first link here is the short link to the GitHub repository where those code samples are located, and you should be able to go there and download them if you want to check them out. Yeah. Yes. Yes, I will click on that. I'll click on that link here. The question is, can we show where the code sample is located? Let me just open that up in a browser here. Sorry. Yeah, so here's where you can find the code samples. And in our README file here, we have just a brief explanation of the samples in the GeoEnrichment service.
And there was just two folders there. There was Max's Python folder and my JavaScript folder, and within them you can find all the code that we showed today.
Yes, absolutely.
Is the 2017 data for the U.S. coming out around UC again? And I guess a follow-up, can you specify a year, or is it just switch and then all your reports switch with it?
So the question is, when will the 2017 data update be available? And the second part of the question was, I believe, can you access multiple vintages of the data through GeoEnrichment?
Yeah.
So the answer is, it should be around UC time. We can't promise an exact date right now, but it should be around this summer. And the service has one vintage at a time. So when we update from 2016 to 2017, it'll be the 2017 data that's accessible through the service.
Is that announced anywhere so we kind of know it's coming?
Yeah. We typically put out blogs and do some customer outreach to our users to let them know it's coming. Yes. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on the last day of the conference here. If you do have any follow-up questions, I'll pull up our slide here again with. Yes, please take our survey if you have the Esri Events app downloaded, and feel free to reach out to either Tony or myself with any additional questions. Feel free to shoot us an email.